Hi, my name is Speech-Madsen, and this is my technical speaking assignment. So, for my assignment, I decided to talk about child abuse. So, what is child abuse? It is the physical or mental maltreatment or sexual molestation of the youth. So, in this speech, I'll be talking about the types of abuse, the symptoms and disorders, the risk factors associated, and the long term effects. So, the types of child abuse, there are four main types of child abuse. There are physical, sexual, neglect, and psychological or mental. So, in a study, I overviewed online 2015 statistics from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They did a 1 year statistics in Georgia for the victims of each one of these abuses. So, for sexual abuse, there was 927 victims. For physical abuse, there were 2,913 victims. For emotional abuse, there were 5,745 victims. And for neglect, which was much higher, 20,121 victims. So, some of the symptoms and signs regarded with abuse would be anxiety, regression, higher risk taking behavior, and irritability. I suffer from anxiety myself. I know it's really hard to get yourself out there and even be able to do anything. And people that suffer from these as a result of abuse usually have a really hard time functioning socially in the world. So, some of the physical risks in an article that I went over with the physical risks, the mental risks, and the sexual risks, Dr. Roxanne Dryden Edwards went over these topics in great detail, and I have a little bit of information for you. So, risks include mental retardation, brain injury, and death. So, usually in the children that are very young, if they're extremely physically abused or hit in the head with severe head trauma, they can die as young as a child. They can also have extreme mental retardation growing up and severe brain injury and concussions. So, the mental risks of mental abuse would include depression, anxiety, and severe anger issues as they age, which we'll be talking about later. We'll be talking about the effects in the long term. And the sexual risks include sexual dysfunction and dependency on others in relationships as you get older, which we will be talking about later as well. And so, in the study on childabuse.com in 2010, including the fatality rate of children up to 18, was that the children younger than 1%, younger than 1, 47.7% either killed themselves or died as a result of child abuse. 1 to 3 years old, 31.7% had that effect. 4 to 7 years old, 11.1% had that effect. And 8 to 11, 3.6% had that effect. And 12 to 15, 3.8% had the effect. And 18 to 21, it was so small that there wasn't even data to conclude from there. So, how this affects adults in Dryden's study, again, the social and physical and economic problems are huge for people that are a result of abuse. So, most people that have resulted in abuse, when they're older, they have lots of problems with lower levels of education, so they don't pursue school as far, or they have a lot of struggles in school and don't really progress. They have lower levels of employment, which is proven in her study, and most people that don't have abuse as a child or have a normal upbringing have a lot higher employment. And their income and assets are a lot lower, usually because they're in a dysfunctional or violent family, and it is harder for them to make money because of their mental or physical issues. And this comes as a result a lot greater for women than it does men, because women are statistically abused far more than men, especially young girls. And the data from the third national incidence study indicated that all subjects of maltreatment is most clearly associated with poverty. So it has a very direct correlation in between the two, and it is very unfortunate for those people that have experienced that to even have to go through more hardships as they get older. So, in the long-term effects, study by Roland C. Summit, medical professional. Um, he concluded that the secondary trauma entering a world that doesn't provide assistance. So they provided the trauma they had, they attend to apply it to their later on experiences in life. And most people, these children, grow up to be adults and they are stigmatized the child of lying, manipulating, or imagining. For example, Judge Kavanaugh's case with the doctor that came out in with the case of him sexually abusing her when she was 16 years old. Most of the government and even the president was saying she was imagining or making up the facts, which in case is most likely not true. They result in abandonment issues and self-hate, and most of the time there's a syndrome that happens from sexual abuse, and it's called sexual abuse accommodation syndrome, and it's composed of 5 categories. Secrecy, so excluding their issues from people, even ones they love. Helplessness, feeling like there's no way out of the situation. Entrapment and accommodation, feeling like they're trapped and there's no accommodation for their abuse or their situation, feeling like there's not help. They basically just feel alone most of the time. And delayed, unconvincing disclosure would be them delaying telling their secrets, just as like the Kavanaugh case. Most of the time, it's not taken seriously by a lot of people, which is very sad, but also true. And this keeps them from telling the secrets or traumas they went through. And retraction would just be drawing back and kind of curling up into depression and not being able to function normally in society. So the long-term effects of neglect would be starting around the 1970s. So they saw interest in the studies of maltreatment, and children from the studies all over the United States who had been affected by abuse performed lower and standardized tests. They resulted in hostility, aggression, and withdrawn behavior as they got older, and this all came from the ASPAC Handbook on Child Maltreatment. The physiological effects, Sigmund Freud, a renowned psychologist, regarded many psychiatric problems as manifestations of early childhood traumas. So he interpreted the cognitive, emotional, behavior symptoms of hysterical patients as results of traumas they had influenced earlier on in life. So what I talked about in this speech was the types of abuse, the symptoms, the risk factors, and the long-term effects. And I hope that you guys have a greater understanding and that you'll be more aware of how it actually happens in the future. So thank you.